Welcome to the Ripple Effect Podcast. I am your host, Steve Harper, and today I'm joined by a really interesting dude. His name is Justin Foster. Justin and I were introduced to one another by a good friend of ours, Ann Fry. I guess Justin and Ann were neighbors. Justin and his family recently moved to Mexico, which I'm super intrigued to learn about. And he is just a really, really interesting cat. We have exchanged a lot of emails. We've connected. I've had to really heap mad praise on him because he was super patient in getting this done. We've been talking about it for the better part of a year. And he was super, super kind. A few months back, some situation happened with my dad. So I was going to be out of town. We got it rescheduled. We were supposed to do it last Friday. And I was on a demo and it was supposed to be done like 2 hours before Justin and I were set to record. And, I didn't get done until an hour after we should have been done with the interview. Super kind, super patient, really, really easy and accommodating. Justin is the co-founder of massivechange.co. We'll dig into that. And he also is a prolific writer. He's got The Third Way on Substack. Fascinating, fascinating guy. He calls himself the activated white dude living in central Mexico, co-founder of Massive, helping soul-led entrepreneurs build sacred brands as a fractional CMO and coach. He calls himself a writer, a poet, and a provocateur. I think he is that and then some. He loves coffee, he likes bourbon, and country music purist. He's a country music purist. I love that. I love that. He is just one of the most interesting conversationalists, and he's one hell of a connector, and I can't wait for you guys to meet him. I'm super grateful he agreed to do this. He was super patient in getting it scheduled. And so with no further ado, let's dive into the Ripple Effect Podcast with Mr. Justin Foster. Guys, I'm super excited to be joined by Justin Foster today. Justin, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
How is life south of the border? You and your family just recently relocated to Mexico. What part of Mexico? I've been dying to ask.
Yeah, we're in Mexico City in
Okay.
an area called Colonia del Valle, which is it's just south of the city center.
Okay.
And we got down here in early June, and people ask me, what's it like to live there? And I'm like, well, we moved here. We're not really living here yet in the sense of like, it's a huge adjustment to move anyway, but it's especially huge to move to a different country. It's something I'd never done before. So Virginia, my partner, has lived in multiple countries, and so she was more used to the process. But the big adjustment for her and for me is that we live in a big city now, and the noise, it's like the city has tinnitus and you can hear it
all the time, right?
Yeah, except at night. It's really interesting to have like 22 million people live here, and from mostly at night, unless there's sirens or something, it is completely silent. So it's kind of strange,
I'm curious, how did you pick Mexico City versus anywhere else in Mexico, and what was the draw for it? Just the experience there? What motivated you guys to move? Because you were living in Austin, Texas. Actually, for our audience, just a little bit of background for us. We were introduced by Ann Fry. It's only taken us the better part of a year to get this thing going, but you and I have been on each other's emails and we've communicated that way. But this is actually the first time we've actually gotten an opportunity to see each other somewhat face to face. But I know her and Jim were very sad to see you guys move. But what was the drive and the motivation to go to Mexico City?
Yeah, so I'll start with that question. So there were three motivations. One is that Virginia, my wife, my partner, is from Nicaragua. She's been in the U.S. we've been together for 5 years. She's been in the U.S. for 8 years.
Okay.
And she can't go back to Nicaragua because she is the president of the president of the largest women's rights group in Central America, maybe one of the biggest ones in all of Latin America. And the Ortegas, plural, the president and his wife, who is the vice president, have her basically on a target list.
Wow.
Even though she's a U.S. citizen, it would still be very unsafe for her to go, or unsafe for her family that lives there. They'd be more likely to do something to her family.
Oh,
So Texas is I've learned the difference here. Texas is very Hispanic, but not necessarily Latino in the way of like Latin America. The
yep.
only city that would be like that in the US would maybe be Miami. And it was just this time where I was like, she can't go back. I got to see her at times like when we got married, and many friends from Nicaragua and around the world, as many of them exiled, came to the wedding, and her energy was so much more free. And
Really?
I said to her, like we were actually on the beach in Cabo last summer, and I said we knew our lease was going to be up on our house in Austin, and I said, what if we moved to Mexico? And she was like, really? So, wow. And so number one was really for her and for Andre, my stepson, who is, he's an American kid in many ways. And it was important to Virginia that Andre is able to like, get to know his roots,
Yeah.
even though he's not Mexican, but still,
Yep.
Latin America.
Latin America. Yeah.
Number three is Trump and MAGA. I just I just feel like I want to fight them from here. Um, and I guess number four is cost of living, really from a
Yeah.
practical standpoint. At almost 55 and been an entrepreneur for 23 years, I don't have a 401k. I don't have investments, and everything. I've lived lean,
Sure.
and but that's not sustainable. And I don't want to be a pain in the ass any more than I already am to my kids. And so, you can come down here and live very reasonable. There's so less, in many ways, it's less expensive
Yeah.
here. So there's more, but those are the main reasons. The reason, Steve, for Mexico City is everybody with my last name that I really love pretty much across the board of all the people with my last name live in Portland, Oregon. So
Okay. Yep.
my older son, my younger son, their partners, my mom, my former wife, who's still a dear friend of mine. They all live in Portland. We don't want to live in Portland. I love them. I don't love Portland. But I need to. I've committed to going back there at least once a quarter. And so we started looking, and the only city in Mexico to get to Portland that's fairly easy is
Uh-huh.
Cabo. And I don't want to live in Cabo. Cabo's like Phoenix with a beach, or Palm Springs with a beach.
Yep.
It's not pretty. I
Yeah.
mean, and number two, and maybe even number one more, is that Virginia's mom, my mother-in-law, lives in Mexico City, and she's very youthful in many ways, but it's nice to be close to her, and it's nice for her to be able to see Andre very regularly, and so Mexico City was the choice, and then we kind of just, you found the school for Andre first,
Yep.
and that we liked, and that ended up being in Colonia del Valle, and we found an apartment, which is a funny story unto itself. And his school is about a 10-minute walk south of our apartment. So
Oh, that's perfect. How old is Andre?
he'll be 16 in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was so moving not only to a different country, but then on top of that with a teenager? I am very curious
Yeah.
how that transition worked. I mean, was he all for it? Was it a challenge? How's he acclimating to the school environment down there? Because I understand educational system is vastly different from what he's probably experienced here in the
Yes.
U.S.
Very different. Yeah. Very different. Well, he's moved a lot in his life. And uh, and certainly we talked to him about the idea, and he had a voice in it. We wanted to honor that. And he said he wanted to do it. As
That's
long
awesome.
as it was a funny thing is he said, I just want to be able to go see Kendrick Lamar with his best friend. And so I made that happen. Actually, before we moved, he got to go see Kendrick in Houston,
Oh,
and his first ever big concert. I didn't go with him. I dropped him off, and they went to the show, and that's pretty cool. I love Kendrick Lamar too.
yeah.
And between the three of us, he has assimilated the fastest. And part of it's conditional. He is in school, and he's very social, and like he made lots of friends. And the school system here, even if he was in public school, he's in a private school here. That Latin Americans take their education seriously, and the whole standardized testing, and you can cheat and chat GPT your way to making test scores. That shit doesn't fly here. So that's been a big adjustment. And but I give him credit that he's not like necessarily, Virginia's got a PhD and she seriously could probably just stay in school permanently. She just
Yeah.
loves to learn. He's not really like that,
Yeah.
but he's shown up on some like stuff that would be really hard. He's shown up, and I'm super proud of him for that.
That's awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. So it sounds like the transition from his perspective was relatively not challenging, and for you, you're still, you're kind of in that honeymoon phase, right? Probably in terms of just still getting acclimated. I've really enjoyed following your adventures via Instagram. I mean, I'm amazed at, and I've never been to Mexico City. I hope to come one day and hang out, maybe have a cerveza or two with you or something,
That'd be
but
awesome.
the
Yeah,
colors and just
yeah,
the pageantry of that city and Mexico in general, but really what you've documented in your time there is really, really magnificent. Did you know that going in, or was that, kind of a surprise in terms of how you said there was a funny story in terms of how you found your apartment? I'm hoping you'll
yeah.
share that, but I
Sure.
mean, the whole environment and area, I think one of your posts was talking about, basically you don't go to like HEB and, shop for 2 weeks worth of
Hmm.
groceries. Your market's around the corner. Everything is
Hmm.
very social around that type of shopping and that experience. It's very communal. But I've really been amazed at how you've acclimated so quickly to that environment.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, there's no two wheat even the same. Like there's nothing homogenous about Mexico at all. Um, and it's diverse in a very different way than we would consider diversity in the U.S. because there's not a lot of like what do they say, ethnic diversity here.
Yeah.
But every single person looks different, like they're different style. And it's a funny little observation I haven't shared before. I'll do it here now. Is Do you know Gorn Brothers in down South Congress, the hat store?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a small little chain. I think they're out of New Orleans,
Yep.
and they have these ball caps that have like a spirit animal type thing on
Uh-huh.
them. You see those everywhere here, mostly on like older dudes, like my age and up. And it's got like the dog or the bull or the rooster.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's like there's a individual expression here is very unique. So from an architecture standpoint to style to all kinds of different things, it's just very, very diverse. And um, so you mentioned honeymoon, like there's the goal here is for me is that I want to there's a learn about the city. I want to be in. I want to live
Yep.
here. And but it is so different than living in the U.S. that you can't really even imagine it.
Yeah.
And I don't really. I'm going to write an essay in the coming week or so about what it's like to be an immigrant. Like the perspective is so eye opening. It makes me extra like angry to the point of nausea about the way that immigrants are treated in the U.S., especially
Yeah.
immigrants from that are black or brown.
Yeah.
And it just infuriates me. And so there, some days it's overwhelming, and I didn't realize like how much the language barrier would be a thing. I thought, well, I'm learning, I'm smart, I was taking lessons, I'm married to a Latina, like there's Google Translate and everything, but it's, I have dealt with in my life something called RSD, which is rejection sensitivity disorder or
Okay.
dysphoria. It's a combination of RSD comes from ADHD and childhood trauma typically.
Okay.
And I find myself frequently, I wouldn't call myself triggered like a panic attack, but definitely like heart racing, sweating when I have to communicate with
Ah.
somebody. And and if I'm not internally resourced, if I'm not, we were talking a little bit before we went on air that I've had to switch medications for ADHD. It's kind of messing with my head. But if I'm not internally resourced, I almost like shut down. Like and I'm very much an extrovert. So the idea
Yeah.
that I'm just going to stay in the apartment is strange. But I'm working through those feelings, and that's why I, I, I I went back to working with a therapist, a Mexican woman named Irma, who's been amazing, and kind of like I got to get resourced and I got to learn the language.
Yeah.
So I got to accelerate that. So I'm going to be doing some more like group classes. So maybe I can make some friends too.
Ah,
Uh, but it's been that part has been more difficult. And I'm 6'3", shaved head, beard, white. I got Viking blood. You can kind of tell, and
you catch attention. Yeah.
yeah, and it catches attention, and it's not necessarily good attention either. Most people are just sort of neutral, but I will try to explain it this way. Do you know like the kind of privileged liberal college girl, like, I'll use that, or
Mhm.
guy, but typically it's like a social justice warrior, and and it's like she's a vegan and she's got all the bumper stickers on the car her parents bought for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of a version of that here with the younger
Okay.
people, which is the whole gringo go home, that you're a colonizer, you're gentrifying and things like that. Now that's where I live. That's not
Yeah.
true. There are
Really, that's
parts of
good.
Mexico that there's a lot of gringos. That's part of Mexico City, but it's a tiny minority that doesn't like it, and they don't even live there often. They don't even live in the same area. It's sort of it's a so kind of it's a little bit of a righteous projection. Let's just put it that
Mm.
way. And so there's a little bit of that, and there's a little bit of like some of the older people. Um, they don't. You can just tell they're like, oh, another American,
Another American.
another,
Yeah.
another gringo. A little bit of that. Now those are exceptions, but when you have RSD, you don't really remember. You just sort of over-index
Sure.
everyone's reaction to you, and it's so that part has been. I didn't realize it was going to be such a mental struggle to deal with my own like inner shit again. And it's like cultural RSD. It's this. I,
Yeah.
I don't know another way to describe it. But I'm aware. Awareness is the first step to change. So I'm
Yeah.
aware that I was like, oh, well, what would make me more confident is to, well, getting my meds figured out would be nice, but also learning the language. And then I need some people to hang out with that are bilingual besides
Yeah.
Virginia and Andre.
Yeah.
And so that's the next step is to make
Well,
some friends.
as soon as we're off of this, I'm going to make an introduction to you. I had a guest on last year, Maritza Garcia. She was living in Miami. She's a brand. You guys would talk. We'll talk about your career here in just a sec. But comes from marketing background. She's a fractional CMO. She was, I think, vacillating between Miami and different parts of Mexico, but she has settled back in Mexico City.
Oh,
Amazing lady, loves to really engage, connect. She is just a delightful young woman, and moving back there, she's found her vibe through going to a lot of I guess there's a huge entrepreneurial movement there, so there's a lot
there
of
is, yeah,
co-working spaces, a
yeah.
lot of places for collaboration and connection,
Hmm.
and she would be great to connect with.
Oh,
One,
yeah.
she
Please
speaks
do.
the language phenomenally well. Obviously, she's from Mexico, so she would have that part covered, but she's also a very good English speaker, and just an amazing, amazing spirit, and smart as a whip, and has already developed this amazing network down there. She was a
Oh man.
little concerned that she might not be able to do it as quickly as she's done in other parts where she's lived, but she did it, and she's loving life. And so she would be a great connection. I know Mark Miller and you, I think, may have connected through the pond. He moved to a different part of Mexico, I think, outside of Guadalajara. I may be wrong. He'd probably get angry with me for not being able to pronounce the town he's in. But that was one of the things that when him and his wife, sadly, she passed away about a year ago, but they
Mm.
moved down there for, the culture. They moved down there for the healthcare system. They moved there for just the quality of life and have
Mhm.
loved it. And that was one of the first things he did is he started getting immersed in the language. He, like a lot of us, probably only had Spanish in high school, and maybe knew a handful of words or phrases going down, but he threw himself in, and now he is very, very 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 good. Speaks the language very well, and
Hmm.
but he threw himself in, and I think that was part of his anxiety early on. It's like you want to be a part of all that's going on, but if you can't communicate, even if you're trying to connect with somebody through the eyes or body language, or just through figuring it out along the way, the awkwardness of that kind of never goes away. And so he, I think, would also be a great resource for you. And I don't know how often they go, or he
Yeah,
goes
I
anywhere
mean,
close to
yeah,
Mexico City, but it would be a good resource for you, I
I would
think.
love an intros to both of those people. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
You have a gift to
I don't
quote
know
to,
about that, but I just know a lot of cool
yeah,
people, yourself
yeah.
included. And I love, helping people try and make that connection. I also have
Mhm.
a business owner that I know really well that started a outsourced IT company, and he travels. Ironic, he's actually from India, but learned to speak Spanish fluently. Built a business. They've got a service delivery center. He's recently retired. I think they sold the company, but I know he's down there a fair amount. And just a great guy, and has all the great connections in and around. So. As I think about all these connections, I'll
Yeah,
definitely hook you up, because I
please. I
think,
would
like
love
you
that.
said,
Yeah,
getting some people in your corner is probably a good way to continue
yeah,
to help you
yeah,
get acclimated, and of course battle some of those those challenges you might be facing alone.
yeah. But something you said too. This is the most entrepreneurial city I've ever been in. And
Yep.
so it's entrepreneurial in the sense of sort of what we would consider entrepreneurial in the US, like, tech startups and things like that. But it's like you just walk down the street and there's somebody that's got a little, like a little charcoal grill, and they're making empanadas or, something, and people sitting around eating them. And you go to the park and people have set up, like, somebody bought like six of those little electric cars that kids
Yep.
drive, and they rent them out for some, a couple pesos, and it's just everywhere. And the most accurate thing I've heard about Mexico before I moved here was somebody that had lived in Mexico, who was a gringo that lived in Mexico for like 30 years. She said Mexico is like the United States in the 1970s, but with internet.
Ooh.
And growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was born in 1970. I can see it. I can see that. There's not all the chicken shit bureaucracy
Yep.
related to, like, just over regulation,
Yeah.
and things like that. And there's a downside to it. Consumer rights that we would consider in the United States doesn't really exist here.
Yeah.
It's a sort of buyer beware.
Yeah.
And there's other elements that I'm not saying all regulation is bad. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's nice to be able to. It's very interesting to feel the energy of people that are creative thinkers, and where being an entrepreneur is still a viable option.
Yeah.
And that's becoming, in my opinion, less and less the case in the United States.
Yeah.
So,
I would agree. I absolutely would agree. That's it sounds like you're at the right place at the right time, where you're supposed to be, and super excited to continue to follow your adventures with great curiosity. And hopefully maybe one day, come down and
yeah,
visit
I
with
would
you,
love that.
because
Yeah, I
I
would
think that
love
would
that.
be awesome. What was the most surprising thing to you about making this transition?
I think it goes back to I'm going to give you shockingly, I'm going to give you like a really deep answer. Is it back in about early 2010, 11, somewhere in there, I went through like a deconstruction process of my faith. So
Hmm.
after that, I still, like, as I wrote the other day, I think everyone that's a person of faith should go practice being an atheist for about a year just to see what it's like,
Yeah.
because you find out what you actually believe in. And so I did this whole, like, significant deconstruction. and
Okay.
and so there's a similar thing here, but it's more of a systemic deconstruction. Is that the advantages that I had in the US don't exist here right now. Now, there's still, anywhere you go in the world, if you're a tall white dude from the United States, you're going to have some privilege, some advantage. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
However, a lot of the other things, like, I'm a professional communicator. That's what I do. I'm great at networking, or relationship building, and I haven't found, because of the language barrier, but it's also I'm sort of rediscovering again at almost 55 who I am. And what's interesting, being in a different culture as an immigrant, which are two different things. So, different culture as an immigrant is I am stripped away to what I am without any labels.
Hmm.
I have to be way more in my heart. I have to be, like I'm a genuinely curious person.
Yep.
And so there's been this kind of, in addition to the downside of a systemic shift like that, of which is, sometimes rampant anxiety and a sense of, wanting to crawl under the bed and, whatever, is there's a bunch of positive things too. It's like partially because I walk everywhere almost, unless I have to get someplace quicker because of an appointment, I'll generally walk, even if it's like an hour away, because the weather here is basically the same all the time,
Okay.
around 72 degrees and mostly sunny most of the time.
Definitely not Austin weather.
No, no. Yeah, another reason we chose Mexico City.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but I've lost weight, I don't know how much, probably 20 pounds. And I don't stress eat here.
That's good.
Um, and I just feel younger in general. Like my body feels younger here. And I think it's so the most surprising thing to sum all that up is I I don't think most people realize how like suffocating the United States has become on our souls, on our
Yeah.
beings. Like how much money it takes now to have a life where you don't, where it used to be around 70,000 a year, not just
Yeah.
about 10 years ago.
Yep.
And there was a new study now that it's around 1.4 million before, so you don't feel like completely stressed out,
Yeah.
all the time. And and a sort of an addiction to work, like my identity associated with work.
Yeah.
Um, it's you just can't. I've been back to the United States twice since moving here, and immediately I can feel it. And it makes me sad because I don't think it was always like that. I don't think it was suddenly. Maybe it was like that. Maybe it is like that if you're a person of color, a person from a marginalized community. But it was interesting to feel like this oppressive energy, and some of it is the fact that 35% of the population has lost their freaking minds,
Yeah.
and so there is some of that as well. And you don't have any of that here. There's all kinds of issues and problems, and but there's very little gun violence, and unless you're being targeted by the narcos for some reason. uh, but very little gun violence. It's essentially impossible to buy a gun here. There's it's much more, the Spanish word is tranquilo, like chill,
Yeah.
except for the honking, which is sort of a strange dichotomy. Better honking than shootings, I guess.
Yeah. Of
Uh,
course. Yeah.
yeah. But that difference of like what it's like to live in the US system, and the way I described it, and I'll wrap this part of what I was saying here, is the US is a system that produced a culture.
Yep.
And unless you're a person of color or a queer person, or an immigrant or something where you have an identity that's not necessarily only related to being American, um, that's the culture. Here, it's a culture that produced a system, and that system has been, it's had its share of, all kinds of, wars and oppression too over the years. But there's a sense here of community that I don't think I've ever felt anywhere in the US too. Of like we're kind of all in this together. So uh, anyway, I could go on and on, but the systemic differences are palpable to me.
Yeah. I have a very good friend I play soccer with, and I used to coach his son in soccer. And one of the things that he shared with me was that here you work to live, there you live, or excuse me, here we live to work, and there
Mhm.
you work to live. The
Mhm.
life balance that they have is vastly different. The
Yeah.
pressure, the expectation, there's more of an understanding that work when it's there has to get done and get done as efficiently and with as much quality as possible. But at the end of the day, you don't sacrifice your soul in order to do it.
Yes.
And I just remember him telling me that it's just a completely different component. He goes to
Mhm.
work here, runs his own company, works 6.5 days a week, just to make ends meet. He would work there 4 days a week.
Mhm.
And 9 times out of 10, the family, he does flooring and he's an exceptionally good carpenter. And he said there you would be invited into the home of the
Yep.
family you'd work with because that was considered
Yes.
rude not to. You'd
Yes.
be a part of their dinners, you'd be a part of their lunches, that you would
Yes.
not be ever looked at as a lower class worker doing this manual labor. They would treat you with respect and kindness. And here it's as if you don't even exist, but hurry up and get the job done. And no matter what we agreed to, the price is always, they always feel like they can knock it further down. And it made me sad. And I know for him, he came here with his wife at the time. They had kids, and they were at this point. I think in his life, he kind of looked at it as being stuck, but recognizes the freedom that the opportunities down there present. And he said that it's not that I don't expect to be here a big portion of my life, but I expect to live my life down where I'm more welcomed in more, not even just familiarity, just feel like I am at a place where people appreciate me for who I am.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And identity is very different here. I have observed, one thing there is here is pretty rampant is classism is pretty rampant in the sense
Oh,
of, and it's not that you look necessarily look. I mean, yeah, maybe I don't know. I'm not. This is just observational. So, and I'm a white dude, so I might be wrong. But it's a pigmentation is a status here. It's
okay.
not because if like white supremacy or something like that. This isn't Stephen Miller or something. It's like
Hmm.
it's more related to. I think it's because of colonial bloodlines in particular. There's a lot of there's a lot of subconscious bias towards Latinos that have like lighter skin, just they have more status, or if you're
Hmm.
tall, as an example. And so, a lot of the times, you're like your daily, like your labor or workforce is the shorter, darker, more indigenous looking Mexicans,
Hmm.
and so that's a very interesting thing to observe. But there's still kind of an expectation of treating each other with respect and kindness. So it's not
Yeah.
like treating them like the help, but there is sort of this status thing, and you can really see it when you go from here to like a place like Condesa is like in Austin, like Westlake.
Okay.
It's the nicer part of town, and a
Yeah.
lot more gringos up there, but also just like very different part of the city than where Colonia del Valle, which is more like um, the Brentwood area in Austin or something. More like just like a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are. It's just interesting to observe those traits.
Yeah, it'll be even more interesting once you get more familiar with the language and then acclimate that way to figure out how much, not being able to, fully communicate or cohesively communicate just yet
Mhm.
with people and from different walks of life, how that shifts or changes in your perspective. I just remember Saul was his name. Saul mentioned that the one thing that he just loves about Mexico is that everybody is extremely affectionate. They are not
Yeah,
afraid. It's not just a shake hand kind of thing, right? It's hugs and pats on the back. They're
yeah.
very there's a
But
lot of human
but
contact
but
because
only if they know you.
okay,
This
yeah,
is one thing. Yeah, it's not like it's much more like New York. Like on the street,
okay,
nobody's saying "Hola, buenos dias" like to each other.
yeah,
You're just headphones in, eyes down, or if you're with somebody, you're talking to them, but you don't. You could be like standing at a stoplight, waiting to cross the street, and there'll be like 20 people there, but nobody's talking to each other.
wow,
But if you know somebody, or if somebody like I got a very unique experience a few days ago. that there's a very large Nicaraguan community here because of the exiled as well.
Yep.
And so these are people that Anna, my mother-in-law, knows all of them pretty much, and Virginia knows many of them as well. And one of them they were moving to London. They're gonna go, I think, go to college in London or something. So they had a big party at a place, and everybody, I sort of I was like Nika by association. And that, like, they don't know me. And so, but they would come and they'd kiss me on the cheek and hug and everything. And now that's not necessarily something you would do, like just as a stranger. You'd probably get,
Yeah.
they probably wouldn't put up with that. But it's like when you're in, they're affectionate,
Yeah.
and there's a warmth to that is, and a sincerity to it as well that is very unique.
Yeah. That, yeah, that sounds very similar to what he's told me. But like you said, it's truly genuine though. Right. And
Mhm.
once you're in, you're in, and it's almost as if you're, La Familia, right.
Yeah, yeah,
Even if you aren't by blood relation, which I think
right.
is amazing. I just threw that out there because I'm on Duolingo. So just,
Well done.
I I I want to go back a little bit because I want my audience to get an understanding of who you are as an individual, as an entrepreneur, and the venture you're working on today. But you grew up in Oregon,
Hmm.
um, and I liked how something I read about you is like kind of an Oregon cowboy, right? Like
Hmm.
you're a country music enthusiast. You have a lot of ties to sort of that. Kind of that country kind of vibe and feel. Tell us a little bit about how Justin became Justin.
Well, yeah, I grew up in Oregon, on a cattle ranch, which still exists. It's split between my father and my uncle, but it's in Eastern Baker City, Oregon.
Okay.
And I was always kind of the weird kid in many ways, empath and very curious. And I grew up in my mom's family. So my dad's family wasn't associated with this, but essentially a Christian fundamentalist cult that I grew up
Oh,
in.
okay.
And, that whole fundamentalism in almost any situation is basically just teaches you that you're a piece of shit,
Mm,
and so there's nothing other than being really good at Bible trivia. There's no like great gift in any of that. And I also came from a very abusive home, and my mother was abusive, and we have since reconciled, and it took many years. I didn't really connect with her like emotionally and honestly till I was like 46, I think. And anyway, I was very proud of my ranch roots. It was the best part of growing up in that time.
yeah.
Home life sucked, but ranch life was fun. It was hard, and I was a history buff, and I read Louis L'Amour as an
Yep.
example, and I loved Charlie Russell, the painter, and watched all the movies when I could, even because we weren't allowed to go to movies or we didn't have a TV, but I was able to on my grandparents' place watch, John Wayne and Clint Eastwood and
Yep.
uh, you know uh, all of that stuff, and that's sort of indelible. It's just like it is who I am, and um, then lived in Boise for almost 20 years,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and then moved to Austin in 2014 after my like kind of the culmination of that deconstruction I told you about, and I was like, I got to get out of here, and moved to Austin, and I have an affinity in many ways still for Texas, and
Yeah.
I'm honest about the history of Texas. That's different than many people that don't like to hear like what the Alamo was really about,
Right.
as an example.
Yep.
But there's still like there's complexity to it, and there's and so I still very much believe in the ethic or ethos of cowboy culture, and point out a lot that the cowboys, the original cowboys, well, came from were vaqueros. That's where the word comes
Yeah.
from. And about 40% of the cowboys in the American West that worked cattle and stuff were black men. Um, Transgender cowboys were accepted into, most of the time. It's basically, if you were honest and you and you fought and you rode for the brand, as the phrase goes,
Yeah.
and you worked hard, you were accepted.
Yeah.
And there was a code of the West, and I think this is maybe a whole other tangent, but it's why I grieve the Western culture's bending the knee or strange fetish for Trump and all of that, because it
Yeah.
just doesn't add up. Like, he's like the opposite of all of that across the board. Protect women and children, work hard,
Hmm.
be honest. Like, those are the opposite of him and his circle of grifters. Yeah, I mean, and then I didn't go to college. I got married when I was 18. I didn't go to college. Logan was born. I found out that I could sell. And I was in sales. And one day, and a long story, very short, I just found out I was really good at brand strategy, and it was almost by accident.
Yeah.
And it's a story for another time of like how someone else's stupidity led to an opportunity for me. And and I realized I had this gift of being able to, like, I remember the first time I led a brand strategy session, and the client, she cried. She was like, "Yes, that's what I've been trying to say." Like, and I had this gift, very inherited, like inside of me, that I just didn't know was there, of the ability basically to take what your soul wants to say and help you say that to the world. It's the simplest way to say it.
Love that.
I call it brand poetry, because it is around brand. Like, to me, your brand is how other people experience what you believe.
Yeah.
It's how other people experience your energy, whether that's a collective energy of a large corporation or your solo brand energy. And that led to 23 years of variations of doing brand strategy. It's been basically the same. Obviously I learn and grow, and I created, expanded my knowledge in a lot of different areas, but it still comes back to that gift. I have a tattoo. My first tattoo I got is it just says Isaiah 50:4. And Isaiah 50:4 is I call it my mission verse, because it says, "You have been given the tongue of the learned to give a word in season to those that are weary."
Oh,
And so,
that
I
just gave
was,
me chills. I mean,
yeah,
that is what
yeah,
you do. I mean,
that's what I do. Yeah. And
wow.
whether it's speaking or writing as well, I do public speaking, not as much as I used to, intentionally. Um, Unless I get to talk to a room full of white dudes, then I definitely want to have that gig, because that's fun. Because I am, that's why I say in my bio, I'm a professional agitator.
Yeah.
Um,
And a
yeah,
provocateur. I love that.
in a provocateur, yeah, and it's completely by design. Like, it's real, but I don't. It's like I don't. I'm here to agitate. And the last part of this, how I evolved, and really this being in Mexico is an extension of this, is in 2020. You had obviously you had the pandemic and this weird split. And if you get to see the movie Eddington with
Yep.
Joaquin Phoenix and Pablo Pascal, you get a little kind of, that's like Eastern Oregon or Idaho, the same, even though that's based in New Mexico, is that
Yeah.
same
I was gonna
weird.
say they filmed it in my home state, right?
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
So you get a sense of that. Like, so there was like, oh, this is weird. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't about politics anymore. And then George Floyd's murder was like, that was like a tipping point for me. And I've talked to a lot of other white dudes that said the same thing. Like, we were aware that systemic racism was a thing and everything, but there was something about it. And then I meet Virginia, who is she's the most beautiful, smartest person I've ever known. But she also is an activist, and she's a systems thinker. And
Yeah.
I remember in one of our very first, like when we first got together, we're talking about freedom of speech, and I was talking about comedy, and I very much believe in the role of comedy to like skewer, be able to say it. Like, comedians should be able to say whatever they want.
Yeah.
Now, like Mark Marin says, you can say whatever you want, but there's also accountability. But she said, you don't understand, because I was sort of defending Dave Chappelle, even though I don't agree with what he says. And she said, you don't understand something, is that when people talk like that in Latin America, women die.
Hmm.
And I was like, holy shit. Like, I didn't,
Yeah.
or another
Perspective
time,
shift. Yep.
Yeah, perspective. Another time she says, yeah, we're all equal, but you have more equality.
Yeah.
That sort of like, and I was like, whoa.
Yep.
And then the real tipping point to why I do what I do today, the final kind of thing was January 6th. I was just like, it still makes me sad to
Yeah.
this day. And it was just like, I'll say it very bluntly, but like, fuck this shit. Like, I
Yeah.
am no longer going to pretend like politics is some separate thing that is insulated and, that we're going to work on. I'm going to do brand strategy so you can hit your numbers. I'm not doing that anymore. Now, I want you to hit your numbers, but if you don't
Yeah.
have a soul, and if you're not willing to take a stand, if you're not willing to be a little bit of Martin Luther, who was an insider who disrupted the church, metaphorically in this case, if you're not willing to do that, I don't want to help you get better at branding. Why
Yeah.
would I do that? And I remember I knew this when I landed the largest deal I've ever landed as far as like dollar amount. And they were nice people, and it was a good enough company. It wasn't like they were, terrible people, but it was in the midst of all this, and it was a tech company, and we were just trying to do marketing around like the ROI of using their technology or something. I was like, I finished the project, I did a good job, and blah blah blah, but I just couldn't do it anymore, and that's where I'm at today. And a dear friend of mine in Austin, that favorite marketing line of all time is advertising is the price you pay for being bored.
I love that.
But what's interesting is that he wrote that in a book about word of mouth years ago. And that's still true, but now we got the freaking algorithm. That's why I created this new cohort that I'm launching called F the Formula. Because it's not just that the algorithm elevates mediocrity, it's that it reduces excellence. I wrote this the other day, or did as an audio clip, and our marketing team's going to be putting it out soon. But the best marketing advice you'll ever receive will come from inside of you.